What happens when a studio tyrant dangles instant fame on the end of a hotel room key? In classic Hollywood, some actresses took that key, others snapped it in half and paid with their livelihoods. Tonight, we salute the rebels who refused to get laid for a part, were punished for it, yet came away with something box office gold could never buy: self-respect. Listen closely, because every sacrifice you hear is a challenge to us all. What would you trade for your dignity? If their courage moves you, smash the like button, subscribe for more untold history, and share this with anyone who still thinks silence is golden. Patricia Douglas. She was only 15 when her nimble tap steps first flickered across Busby Berkeley's kaleidoscopic musicals, but by age 20, Patricia Douglas already felt like she belonged in Hollywood's shimmering chorus line. The Kansas-born extra worked her way onto high-profile sets, such as Gold Diggers of 1933, dreaming of the day her name might finally appear above the title. That dream curdled one spring night in 1937, when MGM lured dozens of young dancers, including Patricia, to a sales convention that was little more than a booze-soaked stag party. An executive cornered and violently raped her. When the studio offered hush money, she did the unthinkable. She pressed charges and spoke to the press. Douglas's refusal to fold was an atom bomb in an era when women were expected to keep silent, and MGM's retaliation was swift. Louis B. Mayer's fixers smeared her as immoral, and casting offices slammed shut. Within weeks, the lively brunette was persona non grata on every lot in town. She left the screen, worked odd jobs, and disappeared into quiet obscurity. Yet her lonely act of courage lit a fuse that would smolder for 80 years until the Me Too era finally caught up. Patricia paid with her career, but she proved integrity can roar louder than any studio lion. Louise Brooks. Few faces embodied 1920s freedom like the black-bobbed silhouette of Louise Brooks. Pandora's Box and Diary of a Lost Girl made audiences gasp. Paramount called her the flapper who could read Proust between takes. But Brooks also read the room when executives hinted that appliance starlet's currency was sex. She slept with whomever she chose, but never to buy favors. When sound arrived, Paramount demanded she fly home from Berlin to dub the Canary murder case. Brooks refused, not merely out of artistic pride, but because a senior executive had tried to barter a contract extension for her good company on a weekend yacht. Enraged, the studio red-ubbed her voice with another actress, branded her difficult, and let word ripple through Hollywood that she was untouchable. By 1931, the industry's brightest comet was cashiering in Saks and dancing for dimes in cheap nightclubs. She wrote later, "I could have been a star for the price of a night, but daylight matters more." History eventually crowned her an icon, proving that even when the system erases you, truth can still etch your silhouette on the silver screen. Jean Arthur. Audiences adored John Arthur's quicksilver voice and shimmering vulnerability in Frank Capra classics like Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. Yet behind her sweetheart persona lay iron resolve. Under contract to Columbia, she endured studio czar Harry Cohn's legendary rages and his secret corridor visits to actresses' dressing rooms. When Cohn's threats turned physical in 1944, Jean devised a plan. She would simply outlast him. She refused his private rehearsals, barricaded her door, and insisted on an armed guard during shoots. Furious, Cohn suspended her without pay and spread whispers that the 43-year-old star was uncooperative. Rather than capitulate, Arthur quit Hollywood at her career peak, retreating to a sheep ranch and later a teaching post at Vassar. Students recalled that she spoke of acting as a gift you must never trade for shame. Though the industry erased her name from casting lists for over a decade, her Capra performances endured, proof that principled exits can echo longer than compromised stardom. Moren OHara. With emerald eyes and a rebel's spine, Moren OHara exploded onto screens in How Green Was My Valley and became the Technicolor queen of swashbucklers opposite John Wayne. But the Irish starlet carried a secret fury. Producers who handled her like marble during the day felt entitled to paw that marble at night. In 1945, a newspaper ran her blistering open letter. "Since I will not let them kiss me every morning, they call me a cold piece of marble." The stance cost her roles overnight. Directors labeled her unladylike, Exhibitors whispered that audiences found her frigid, and a whisper campaign nearly forced her back to Europe. O'Hara doubled down, refusing to play seductresses designed purely for male fantasy and demanding contracts that omitted after-hours meetings. She weathered lean years, but resilience paid off. The quiet man vaulted her back to the A-list on her own terms. O'Hara later said integrity was worth more than any picture. Her stand reminds us that bravery does not always roar. Sometimes it is a steady Irish lilt saying no until the wolves slink away. Shirley Temple. America's curly-haired sweetheart seemed untouchable until 12-year-old Shirley Temple walked into producer Arthur Freed's MGM office in 1940 and found him exposing himself. Temple giggled in shock. Freed banished her and told talent scouts she lacked grown-up charm. Studio chief Louis B. Mayer compounded the humiliation by propositioning her mother moments later. MGM released Shirley after a single film, and rival studios, wary of crossing Mayer, declined to pick up her option. The golden child who once saved Depression-era box offices suddenly faced closed gates. With characteristic grit, Temple pivoted to 20th Century Fox musicals and then, when adolescence dimmed her marquee glow, to diplomacy, eventually becoming U.S. ambassador to Ghana and Czechoslovakia. Hollywood may have punished her for a giggle of defiance, but she converted exile into a second act that touched millions. Shirley's story proves that refusing exploitation can reroute a life toward greater purpose, and that no mogul's shadow is taller than a girl who chooses sunlight. Lena Horn. The first time Lena Horn stepped under MGM's blazing arc lights in Panama Hattie, critics gasped. The 24-year-old singer glowed like polished obsidian against the studio's Technicolor backdrops. But behind that gloss lay an iron rule. She would never trade her body or her dignity for a part. Gossip whispered that a high-ranking producer invited her to a late script conference the week stormy weather wrapped. Lena coolly replied she discussed music only on the clock. The offer vanished, and so, slowly, did her prospects. She refused the demeaning maid roles doled out to black actresses and rejected any after-hours tutoring, even when moguls hinted a single night could vault her into the A-list. MGM loaned her out, cut her scenes to cameos, then let her contract lapse. The press blamed box office math, but insiders muttered about a woman who wouldn't play ball. Blacklisted during the Red Scare for marching with Paul Robeson and banned by Southern theater chains that objected to her mere presence, Lena retreated to smoky nightclubs and Harlem benefits, singing freedom songs while Hollywood erased her name from casting sheets. Yet when she belted Believe in Yourself decades later on Broadway, the ovation shook the rafters. Horn paid with celluloid silence, but her refusal to bow ensured that every note she ever sang rang unbought and unmistakably her own. Ginger Rogers. Before Hollywood immortalized Ginger Rogers in satin heels beside Fred Astaire, she was a teenager sprinting between vaudeville train stops, already wary of men with contracts in one hand and invitations in the other. At Columbia in 1931, studio boss Harry Cohn summoned the rising comedian to his office. The door clicked shut. Cohn lunged. Rogers dodged, circling a mahogany desk until she found the latch and bolted, her dignity intact, but her future suddenly fragile. Cohn vowed she'd never dance again on his lot. She fled to RKO, where Top Hat and Swing Time crowned her the Depression's dream girl. Yet the rumor of being uncooperative trailed her like a bad purse. When musicals fell out of fashion, producers whispered she was difficult, a coded warning that she refused the casting couch. Roles thinned, offers slipped to ingenues who played by older rules. Ginger pivoted, found triumph on Broadway, nabbed an Oscar for Kitty Foyle, even toured war zones. But the seven-figure paydays that once seemed inevitable never arrived. In memoirs, she conceded she could have kept Columbia's spotlight for the price of a chase around Cohn's desk. Instead, she proved that grace, in tap shoes or street shoes, is worth more than any mogul's IOU. Kim Novak. Chicago art school dropout Marilyn Pauline Novak became Kim the moment Harry Cohn saw profit in her emerald eyes. He remolded her, blonde dye, crash diets, night classes on how to pout. But when grooming turned to groping, Kim drew a line. She rebuffed Cohn's invitation to his yacht and later his demand that she end a flirtation with Sammy Davis Jr. Cohn retaliated with round-the-clock studio chaperones, punitive photo shoots, and threats to derail Vertigo. After Hitchcock wrapped, Cohn leaked rumors of emotional instability and shelved 2 of her films. Novak stood firm, buying out the remains of her contract and fleeing to Big Sur with only paintings and privacy. Hollywood's door slammed. Scripts trickled in from Europe, but American financiers considered her radioactive. Still, in that silence, she painted seascapes, piloted her own plane, and cared for injured animals, proof she didn't need box office validation to feel whole. Cohn died in 1958. 5 decades later, Kim walked on stage at the Oscars to a standing ovation, a living rebuttal to every man who ever said, "Careers depend on compliance." She lost round-the-clock headlines, but kept something rarer, the right to look back without shame. Rita Hworth. Rita Hayworth's rise from chorus girl Margarita Cancino to Columbia's incandescent love goddess was as much Harry Cohn's invention as her own talent. But once Gilda's hip swirl set screens ablaze, Cohn wanted a share of the fire off camera. When Rita declined his hotel suite summons, she was a newlywed pregnant with Ali Khan's child, Cohn exploded. He slashed her salary, halted publicity, and leaked a tale that she was temperamental and washed up. Exile proved brutal. European tabloids jeered when her marriage faltered. Hollywood offered only femme fatale repeats. Rita returned briefly for separate tables, clutching a flask on set, while columnists dissected her weight gain. By the mid-60s, she vanished behind the gates of an ailing mind, early-onset Alzheimer's misdiagnosed as drunkenness. Yet even in fog, she whispered lines from Gilda, reminding nurses she once commanded rooms without unclasping a single dress for a boss. Hayworth's legacy, tarnished in life, gleams brighter now, the poster girl who showed the world a smile that belonged to no man but herself. Joan Collins. At 29, Joan Collins streaked across CinemaScope epics like a comet, cheekbones high enough to wound and ambition sharp enough to match. In 1962, 20th Century Fox dangled the crown jewel, Cleopatra. During a private lunch, a studio president promised the part, if she would be nice. Collins knew the code. She straightened her spine, declined, and watched the role sail to Elizabeth Taylor. Fox labeled her unreliable, buried her in B pictures, and let the gossip columns portray her as a diva past her sell-by date. For 15 lean years, she scraped through Hammer horrors and TV pilots, driving herself to auditions where producers judged her neckline before her audition sides. Then Dynasty turbocharged into primetime, and Joan, now 48, reinvented herself as Alexis Carrington, collecting Emmys, equal pay clauses, and a legion of women who cheered each withering slap. In interviews, she revealed she would rather starve honest than feast on shame, a mantra forged in that long-ago office. The price of refusal was steep, lost millions, lost youth on tabloid racks. But integrity paid compound interest, a career reborn, and a public reminded that the real Cleopatra was a queen because she bowed to no man. Tippy Hedrin. When unknown fashion model Natalie Tippy Hedrin appeared in Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, critics hailed her as a cool blonde heir to Grace Kelly. The studios set her up in a bungalow, gave her French lessons, even painted her wardrobe, a special moss green the director claimed flattered her eyes. But Hitchcock's mentorship came with a monstrous clause. He called Hedrin to his office, locked the door, and demanded she make herself sexually available, however and whenever and wherever he wanted. She stared him down and said, no. That single syllable cost her everything. Furious, Hitchcock ordered live gulls tied to her costume so they could not miss their mark in the attic scene, then refused to release her from a 7-year contract, paying her to sit idle rather than act for another director. Universal even withdrew Oscar campaign paperwork for Marnie at his request. By the time Hedrin escaped the contract in 1966, the ingenue roles were gone. She pivoted, opening a big cat sanctuary, mentoring Vietnamese refugees, and eventually writing a memoir that named her abuser long before Number Me Too. Hitchcock died with his box office records. Hedrin lives to 95, lion-hearted proof that a career can be rebuilt, but integrity once surrendered is gone forever. Rosemary, baby-voiced comic. Rosemary was already a vaudeville legend when she graduated to Broadway's Top Banana in 1951. Producer Harry A. Rom called her to his office, closed the blinds, and suggested she show a little gratitude if she wanted her big number kept in the film version. Rosemary marched back to the stage and, that night, denounced him from the microphone, naming names before a full house. Retaliation was brutal. Every song she sang on celluloid was snipped in the editing room, and Columbia executives warned television casting chiefs she was trouble. Rosemary vanished into smoky lounges while lesser comics filled her TV slots, yet she never apologized. 20 years later, the Dick Van Dyke Show needed a razor-tongued writer named Sally Rogers, and network brass balked, until Carl Reiner argued no one else could fire punchlines like Rosemary. She stole every scene, became a feminist icon, and spent her 80s tweeting encouragement to young comics. 90 years in show business taught her one lesson she repeated often. Silence is consent. Laugh louder instead. Veronica Lake. Studio publicists invented the peekaboo hair that made Veronica Lake the dream girl of World War II GIs, but the actress herself refused to play fantasy off-screen. In her 1970 memoir, she recalls, "Brushes with the casting couch, I didn't succumb," earning her a reputation for being difficult. When she spurned a Paramount vice president's weekend yacht invitation during I Married a Witch, scripts abruptly stopped arriving. Trade papers blamed her temper. Gossip columns cited a haircut safety film that hid her famous locks. The truth was simpler. Lake would not barter her body for a billing. By 1948, Paramount let her contract lapse. She lost her home to the IRS, poured drinks in a Manhattan bar under the name Connie de Toth, and entered folk legend as Hollywood's fastest fallen star. Yet Lake never recanted. She returned in small theater tours, publishing the autobiography that exposed studio coercion decades before it had a hashtag, and died at 50, with royalties finally trickling back in. Her life reads like a noir she might have headlined, talent cornered by greed. Except for its stubborn coda, the heroine walks away, battered but unbroken, because she keeps the one thing the villains can't auction: self-respect. These 13 women walked away from fortune rather than surrender the final say over their own bodies. Their silence on screens became thunder in our conscience, teaching generations that stardom without integrity is just another costume, and courage, once chosen, never fades from the frame.